Good morning, and welcome to our webinar, The Future of Work, Transforming the Employee Journey with Experiential Learning. I am your host, Michaela Lassig, and I'm joined here today by two colleagues, Michael Minucha, who is Stryvr's COO, and Michael Kasauli, our Chief Science Officer. We also have a very special guest who will be joining us in a little bit. His name is Andy Trainer, and he is the VP of US Learning for Walmart. It's a very exciting morning. If you're not familiar with Strivr, we are a VR-based immersive learning company, and our mission is to elevate performance through immersive experience. We were incubated at Stanford University, and what started out as a research project for our CEO then became a tool for training football players, and that quickly evolved into becoming an enterprise-grade solution that's adopted today by many Fortune 500 companies like Verizon and JetBlue and Walmart, and also elite sports organizations. And these companies use Strivr to improve employee engagement, customer service, safety, and operational efficiency. So today we are going to, let's do a quick overview of what you can expect. Michael Minucha will scope out the future of work and put the new employee experience into context. We will then hear from Andy Trainer from Walmart about how they are thinking about the future of work and using immersive learning. And then Michael Kasauli will talk about the next generation of data and insights that you can really only get from immersive learning. And then I'll finish off by letting you know how you can get started at your company. You can submit questions at any time. There should be a question box on the panel, and we will email you back within 24 hours, so feel free to do that. With that, I will hand it over to Michael Minucha.
Thanks, Michaela. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm the CEO of Stryver and one of the founders. When we started Strivr, we were looking to solve a problem around how athletes prepared for game day. We used VR because it was the most effective application of technology to solve that problem. Using technology to amplify workforce productivity is a key to the next decade of how people will work. At the same time, who is doing the work, where they work, and the experience they demand from an employer is evolving. Within all of this, companies will have unprecedented access to data to inform their strategy. But this isn't going to happen by itself. None of this will be possible without employers embracing learning as the key strategic driver for their future. Learning is the top-rated challenge among Deloitte's 2019 Global Human Capital Trends. What jumped out to me is that we're not talking about a steady improvement in learning and training. Executives now believe that a total reinvention and rethinking of our current paradigm is what's necessary for success. Companies invest a significant amount in training. Per ATD, over $1,200 per employee per year. But data shows the employees are still not engaged, and this leads to employee turnover, a huge cost across industries. On the other hand, there's an opportunity for companies who embrace that employees want to learn. They want development. They want to be successful. Companies with engaged employees bring in 2.5 times more revenue than their competitors with lower engagement levels. With this knowledge, it blows my mind that every company isn't doing all they can to ensure that they have an engaged workforce set up for success with the training they need. In the past, to get the most effective training, you had to provide one-on-one mentorship, which is expensive and not particularly scalable. Or on the other hand, you had videos and manuals which can scale really well, but they don't move the needle to engage employees. Today, immersive learning is making those trade-offs unnecessary. It lets you scale your best trainer, provide consistency of training, and be highly engaging for your workforce. So, what exactly is immersive learning? Immersive learning is an interactive training methodology that uses virtual reality to simulate real-world scenarios and train employees in a safe and engaging environment. Learning in VR is great because it gives you the sensation of being there. As your body interacts with the virtual world, your brain activates to make decisions as you would make in the physical world. VR enables on-demand repetition and better retention, translating to improved on-the-job performance. This is why learning in virtual reality is so powerful. It also provides the next generation of data and insights as it captures not only usage data, but also attention, engagement, and performance of the trainee. So let's talk a little bit about a selection of key use cases where we're seeing VR have a tremendous impact already. Within health and safety, because better trained employees make fewer mistakes and diffuse dangerous situations more effectively, like the robbery of a retail store. For operational procedures, VR lets you learn in the flow of work without interrupting the business, so there's less need to bring your employees in for training before or after hours. Within customer service, to boost your employees' confidence on everything from their regular responsibilities to unusual events like training for the holiday rush. And finally, interpersonal skills training used to be exclusively for executives. Now, with immersive learning, you can democratize honing those skills and deliver to every employee in your organization the learning experience they demand. My guest for this webinar is Andy Trainer, VP of US Learning at Walmart. Walmart was one of the earliest adopters of immersive training and one of the first to scale it across an organization for all of their employees. Certainly no small feat. I'm excited to chat with Andy about how he's used immersive training to enhance the culture of learning at Walmart. All right, Andy, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Walmart.
Yeah, so my name is Andy Trainer. I'm Vice President responsible for Walmart Learning in the U.S. business. Been with Walmart almost 20 years. And so responsible really for the learning and development of all of the stores, the home office, realty, and supply chain.
So how is Walmart thinking about the future of work in relation to your overall business strategy?
You know, I think it's really how do we start to prepare the associates for the future. So obviously retail is changing, work is changing. We try to automate as many things as we can so associates can focus more on technology. They can focus more on serving the customers. So we're really gearing that learning experience toward how do you improve service to the customers and really prepare them for what that future looks like in the retail business.
So Walmart has perhaps the most demographically diverse and geographically dispersed workforce in the country. How do you think about approaching learning in a holistic way that'll be actually relevant and useful for everyone?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we do have 5,000 stores spread all across the U.S. We have distribution centers spread all across the U.S. So what we've done for the store side and we're doing for the supply chain side now is we've built facilities that are dedicated training facilities attached to live stores. So we have 200 locations attached to stores. We'll have 10 that are attached to distribution centers. And we do very hands-on functional training in those facilities to really teach the associates the skills they need, not only for the job they're doing today, but for the jobs they'll do in the future. So that allows us to about 80% of the associates can travel to training and go home every day. So they're within driving distance of the learning facility. That's a big win for us because single parent families, single car families now have the ability to go to training that could be 6 weeks long and go home every night for that. So it doesn't limit what they can do in the future. We also know that the way people learn is changing. And so we do webinar training through video chats and things like that. We do virtual reality, which I'm sure we'll talk about some more in a minute. So we do a lot of different types of training for our associates because the way people learn is different. And so we want to be able to give them what they want, when they want, how they want it, so we can better ensure they serve the customers the way we need them to.
With that training, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see today that you're trying to solve?
I think the biggest one is the change in the industry. So obviously productivity and price, cost are big drivers, always have been, but even more in the world we're in today. And so how do you train the associates in an effective way that's cost effective as well? And so everybody learns differently. And so it's really what do we want to do to help them learn faster and better in the environment that makes them more comfortable.
So retail, I've heard, is a deeply personal industry. Is that right?
Yep.
How does an associate's training experience, do you think, impact the service they provide to your customers?
Yeah, so what we noticed, we always knew training associates was the right thing to do, right? Teaching someone how to do their job makes them more effective and more productive in their job. What we underestimated was the confidence that they gave them, not only in themselves, but in the role they play in the store, and even in their own personal life. Of once you know what your job is and you're very clear on it, and you excel at that class and the test that we give them, the confidence they have translates back into the store. And so we have seen drastic improvements in customer associate interaction, and to the point where some of our customers thought we had more associates in the store because the associates were more willing to engage the customers because they weren't worried about being asked a question they couldn't answer. They had
Oh,
the
wow.
confidence to go address the customers face to face. So it's good, really good.
That's really exciting to hear. So take me back on kind of a journey through your mind of when we started working together and you started deploying immersive training. What were some of the business challenges that you were looking to solve, and why you turned to an immersive learning solution?
Yeah, so if you think back, we do functional training. So our goal is to really teach associates how to do exactly the job they've been hired to do, or a new process that we're rolling out. How do they learn how to do that new process?
Mm-hmm.
Because our facilities are attached to a live store, it's difficult to recreate things that might be broken or situations that might happen that they have to deal with. So think about how to find spills or accidents, or how to deal with difficult conversations with customers, or the holiday rush. So you think about the time after Thanksgiving, which is our busiest time in the store. How do you prepare a leader for when there's thousands of people in the store and they all want that one Hatchimal that you have? How do you prepare them for that situation? We don't want to recreate those situations every day in the store because, again, it's an active store and we don't want to create problems for our customers. So
Mm-hmm.
this immersive learning allows us to create those situations that we can't or don't want to recreate in the store, and let the associates go through it in a real lifelike environment so they can learn from it and feel the experience of it.
Would you pick those same kind of use cases again as a starting point?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've moved on to more diversity inclusion, more soft skills, but definitely starting where we started with very tactical, functional skills. One that sounds really simple, but that's probably one of the most impactful is the produce wet wall. So in produce area, there's a wall where all the leafy green vegetables are, and there's a lot of culling you have to do with taking off the dead, sorting the good produce, making sure it's watered correctly, stored at the right temperature. So it's really hard to explain and feels complicated.
Yeah.
We created a module in VR in like 3.5 minutes. You can go through and you learn exactly what to do on this wet wall. And you may not know what a wet wall is when you walk in and do the training, but once you're done in 3.5 minutes, anybody could go and manage and run that wet wall very effectively. So that really helped us understand the opportunities. Soft skills are easy to think about when you're thinking about immersive learning,
Mm-hmm.
but the tactical things have really helped us focus on the really important day-to-day things that they have to do.
Yeah, it sounds like you took a little bit of a step back and looked at where can we get significant impact on the business here. And it doesn't have to be the most complicated thing to start with, but it mattered for what you guys were doing.
Exactly. Yep.
So, Andy, VR is a new technology, but I understand that you've been using it to be able to train associates on other new technologies. How have you found that to work in practice?
Yeah, for sure. So I think as we learn more about Oculus Go specifically, what we quickly realized was people like VR. They think it's neat. It's a new thing. Everybody wants to experience it. And so we had something we call pickup towers that we're rolling out across the entire country. And during the test, we would have to send 4 to 5 associates to a store to set up this tower, teach all the associates how to set it up, how to maintain it, how to use it, how to interact with customers with it. And it was taking probably 4 to 6 weeks
Wow.
with 4 to 5 people there to set it up and get everybody trained. So we with the Oculus Go, and we created a VR module that actually I think it's 4 5-minute modules that teach you how to set it up, how to maintain it, how to use it, and how to interact with customers. And we send an Oculus Go with the tower, no people, and everyone uses the VR module to learn how to use and set up the tower. And so it saved us 4 or 5 people per tower. We're going to roll out probably 1,000 of them this year. So significant savings in travel, in people's time, and everybody likes and wants to do the training, and they actually understand it and retain it because it feels so much like an experience, and they can see the tower. So hugely beneficial for us. So that's one of the main uses we're using for the Oculus Go right now is if we redo the front end, if we do something different, the way we unload trucks, the pickup tower. So new technology is definitely a way we're using VR.
Nice. Walmart was able to move really quickly and deploy this cutting edge technology over a short period of time across a huge organization. For the people listening, what stakeholders do you think need to be involved in the decision-making process to make this kind of initiative successful?
Yeah, it was tough, right? Anything related to training is difficult to prove an ROI because everybody's always working on trying to improve the same metrics. And so training is a key component of it, but it's hard to take benefit from all of it when the whole business is working on it. So we just made sure we engaged all the business partners that would have a stake in the game, whether it was the tech teams, whether it was the actual operators that run the stores, whether it was the leaders of those groups, and showed them the potential and built some modules and showed that actually let them go through it and understand what it was like and what it felt like to do it. And that sold them. Once you go through it and understand that it changes the way you view training because it becomes, and I talk about this a lot, it becomes experiential.
Right.
Instead of it being a lesson that you were lectured or a book that you read or a presentation that you watched, your brain believes it after about 30 seconds that it's really happening. And so now it's an experience and you remember an experience differently and more than you would a lesson. So once we got all the right people, and it's important whether, the end customer, the business that wants to sponsor it, the leadership, we got them all together and showed them. And that was the way we sold it.
Nice. Why did Walmart pick Strivr to work with?
I think luck was part of it. I think we were very fortunate. So Stryver was doing some work with the University of Arkansas, which is just down the road from our home office. And we heard about they were using it for the quarterbacks to teach them different routes and defenses. And somebody on our team was a graduate of the University of Arkansas, heard about it. So we went down to take a look just to see if it was something that we would be interested in. We had no idea. We're just looking for different ways to enhance training. And as soon as we saw it, we realized that with the academies, with 200 locations spread across the U.S., because this was prior to Oculus Go, this was probably three and a half years ago, we had locations where we could put units and people could come to us versus trying to figure out how to get the units to people. So because we had fixed locations, this was a great way to recreate repetitive things that we want to show people over and over. And like I mentioned earlier, situations that we don't want to recreate in a store, but want people to experience and understand. And then, so we reached out, talked to Strivr, and you guys have been an unbelievable partner for us as we went through this journey to figure out what's the right way to use it, what's the wrong way to use it, how often, how little. So it's just been a really good partnership with them.
So we've gotten to the point now that the devices and the software are in place, and we have the associates that we want to help get better and get trained. How do you think about getting them all trained throughout the organization?
So in an organization as big as ours, it's really tough. There's always, we like to say that with 1.5 million associates, anything that can happen once in a million happens almost twice for us. So every situation and everything you can imagine that happens twice. So it's really hard to get a way to get all associates on the same page, to understand the same thing, working on the same goal. And as you get, the further down you get to the associates on the floor, the ones that really interact with customers every day, there's so many of them, it's impossible to get all of them to a location to train. So we had to figure out a way, how do we get to them? And that's what the Oculus Go allowed us to do. Is now we were able to reach associates with a consistent message, concise, in a neat way, that's engaging and memorable, so we can get everybody to understand the direction, the message, the expectation, the goal, and that is really what's going to allow us to kind of change the momentum of what we're doing.
How would you say the associates are reacting to the actual trainings?
They love it. Obviously you have some that worry about motion sickness, which we don't have much of, and then you get some that don't like the fact that you have to wear a headset that someone else has worn. But that is very few and far between. The overwhelming reaction has been very positive. They like it. They want more of it. And they continue to push us to put more content on there so they can learn even more things. So they love it. They think it's the neatest thing ever.
And you find it's relevant across all the generations of the workforce you have?
Yeah, for sure. There was lots of concerns about, even when we started the academies, we use iPads in the academies. We don't print any manuals. We don't do any PowerPoints. Everything's on an iPad. Lots of concerns about generational differences in would they know how to use an iPad. It goes away. Everybody likes neat tech. There just may not have been had the opportunity to learn how to use it. And so we have seen no negative feedback from any generational differences. They all love it. In fact, probably the older generation is more inspired and interested in it than the younger, because the younger, they know about it and have experienced things like that. The older generation, this is something completely different and blows their mind.
So speaking of inspiring those associates, do you feel like this is one of the things that's helping you get to and inspire the future leaders of Walmart?
Yeah, for sure. For a lot of different reasons. One, just training in general. When you spend the time and resources to train your associates on what's expected and what the future looks like, it instills confidence in themselves. It instills confidence in the company and a pride in the company. What the VR has allowed us to do is start to create confidence in ways that were really hard to do. So whether you're having conversations with associates, whether you're having conversations with customers, whether it's diversity and inclusion, you can create situations, positive and negative, in the VR world that allow you to practice in a safe environment and learn from what you did and watch what you did and continue to do that. Whereas historically you do a lot of role playing, and that doesn't feel the same as when you're having to do it in real life. Well, VR does. You think about public speaking. Our store managers have to do morning meetings with their staff every day, and that doesn't sound like a big deal. But if you're not comfortable talking to a group of 50 to 100 people, that can be really daunting and scary. Well, with VR, we can have them practice morning meetings in a virtual world as many times as they want, say whatever they want, and replay it and watch themselves and learn what works, what doesn't, and get better at it. So, yeah, it's definitely changed the way our leaders look at tech, look at the future, and really inspired them to do better.
One of the things that gets me really excited about immersive training is the volume of new data that we have about how people learn and what they need to get to the next level in their career. What unique data has the immersive training provided you and given you insight into the way that you are thinking about your associates learning and performing?
I think we're just cracking the surface of that one. I think we definitely have a lot of data because we do assessments in it, right? So you can do testing within it, and so based on the answers they gave and how long it takes to give the answers, how confident they are or knowledgeable are of what you taught them or tried to teach them. Mm-hmm. So lots of data that way. But VR also allows you to see what they see and look, where they're looking. And so if they're, if you're a great example is if you're walking down an aisle and there's several things that are right or wrong and you miss some, we know that. And so we would know over time, over a group of population, that, hey, everybody misses that this type of sign isn't right, or everybody misses that this associate needs help over here. We can tailor the training based on that to make sure that we point that out so we can further engage it in future training. I think the exciting thing about it is the more we do it, we can start to use that data to tailor training for individuals versus everybody gets the same training.
Right.
So based on that data, we can start to say, hey, you know what, Andy isn't really good at engaging customers. You know, we have a 10-foot rule. You're supposed to talk to customers every 10 feet. I don't do that in the VR. And so we can tailor training to me to, maybe it is public speaking, maybe it is how to engage associates or have those conversations, or maybe another one is they missed that there's the wet wall's wrong, and so we can put them through wet wall. So it opens a lot of doors. Like I said, we're just scratching the surface of it, but we're really excited about the potential of it.
So it seems like there's a lot of ways that you could measure success, but what are the things that are really jumping out to you to define this as working?
Yeah, it varies on the modules, but I would say overall associate engagement is significantly higher when we use this type of training. The knowledge retention is significantly higher. So we know anecdotally as well, you know, customers think we have more associates in the store because they're more confident in helping them. We measure something called clean, fast, and friendly. It's our associate gauge for customer happiness and the experience they have in the store. We're seeing with all this training that those numbers are going up. And then you start to look at specific modules that we roll out, whether it be when we change the way our front end works, that the utilization of it's getting better because we've done this training. So lots of different instances where we see improvement in metrics, and then our turnover just from, in VR is part of it, but just the overall training work that we're doing with the associates, turnover continues to get better every year and is at the lowest it's been in, I don't know, probably 10 years now. So really doing well.
Fantastic. So this is only the start of the journey, but I'm curious, what's been the impact for you personally in implementing some of these immersive solutions?
Lots of gray hair.
I've got it too on the other side of things.
I think it's, for me personally, it's been, I think what the impact to individual associates has been. I think you always know teaching people how to do a job is important. Mm-hmm. But when you see that the personal impact that it has on somebody's life, where they have more confidence not only in their job but their own personal self, that translates to their families, their children, their aunts, their uncles, their brothers, their sisters. That's been really, really awesome to watch. That it's changed people's lives, not just because they know how to do their job, but we're preparing them for future things, and we're giving opportunities to do things that they've never thought they could do or would have had the opportunity to do before.
That's really incredible. Thank you so much for your time today, Andy. It's fantastic talking with you.
Yeah, you too. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks, Michael and Andy. So I'm Michael Kasauli. I'm the Chief Science Officer at Strivr, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the unique immersive training data that we're capturing and how we're using that data to provide new levels of insights for our customers for their training experiences. So broadly, these are the categories of data and analytics that we perform at Strivr. And so starting with usage and moving into sentiment analysis, and then getting into things like skill assessment, so performance data, and then some of the unique VR data that we collect that helps us understand things around attention and engagement of the trainees. We'll talk about that, and then finally get into some of our predictive analytic work that we've done recently. All right, so starting with usage, this should be pretty straightforward and familiar to most of you. Usage data is essentially information around who's using the training, how much are they using the training, what are they seeing when they're training. And this is really important because this sets a really critical foundation for all of the analytics that will come after that. So when we look at performance, when we look at the kind of unique immersive training data and the analytics that come from that, it's all contextualized by the usage data, right? It's important to know, did they actually use it? How long did they use it for, et cetera. So that should be pretty straightforward, but also really important to know. And then second is what we're calling sentiment analysis. So this lets us know how users are actually engaging with the experience from their perspective, right? So we can ask them open-ended questions around, how did you think that training was useful? Did you like it? Did you think it covered the right kind of content, et cetera? And they can let us know in a very open-ended qualitative way, yeah, I really felt like I was there. I really felt like this experience kind of struck me on an emotional level, right? Because oftentimes that's what we're going for. We want people to experience what it would be like to be in that same situation and to have that same level of performance, pressure put on them if it's pressure in some cases, or what it's like to talk to someone about a difficult conversation if that's another case. And again, we want to just validate with the trainees themselves that this is actually doing what we think it's doing by putting people in that real world environment. Okay, and then the third bucket of data analytics is what we're calling skill assessment. So this is effectively performance and looking at direct performance data. And this is a lot of the kind of questions that we ask and the answers that we get back from those questions. And this isn't something that's, the way that we're asking the questions isn't necessarily unique to VR. A lot of type of training methodologies do this. You answer multiple choice questions on a paper-based test, et cetera. What's really important to know, what's unique about what we're doing, is we're creating context. We're creating real-world simulations. And then we're getting data from individuals once they experience those real-world simulations. And that's really important because that lets us, gives us insight into how they're going to perform in the real world that you can't really get from paper-based assessments. In other words, it's a more valid reflection of their real-world behaviors. So sure, it's all choice data, but it's more meaningful choice data when it's done in an immersive training environment like VR, because it's more reflective of their choice, the choices they would make in the real world. And then this is just an example of some of the ways that we can look at performance data. Of course, you can look at distributions of data. So this is an example of how did people do overall, and then look, and you can basically look at the distribution, see some people did good, some people did bad, some people were in the middle. And these kind of like fundamental analytics let us know that A, we have a valid assessment, and then B, we can start to drill into, hey, look at those people that were kind of getting a lot wrong, right, on the left side of that distribution. What was different about them than the people on the right side? What did they know more? What did they know less? Were there particular areas they were stronger in, et cetera? And were they different demographics? So in other words, maybe experience matters. So we can start to do a whole lot just with the performance data that we're getting. And again, we feel like this is more reliable than other types of performance data that you would collect through traditional methods like lecture-based or even computer-based training. Okay, now we'll get into some of the things, the data and analytics that are unique to VR. So these are things like attention and engagement analytics that we perform at Strivr regularly. And what these do is basically provide a lot of context into the performance data. So it helps us basically get another layer of insight into the performance. So it's not just important to know how someone performed, but it's also important to know why they performed the way that they did. So I'll just give you an example of what I mean. Through some of our attention analytics. And so you can see in this scene, this is someone who is behind the deli in a store, and this is basically their training, right? They have to know what to do when things are unfolding in the deli, as they do in a very dynamic environment. And typically the way this is trained is they would be trained in pieces, so that you would be trained on one section, maybe for a few days, the stuff going off to the right with the deli slicer. Another day you'd be trained for just looking at people handling the meat or handling the dishes, and you would never combine those. And then finally, what's really critical is how you would actually interact with customers, right? So there's all this operational stuff going on in the back, and meanwhile, a customer walks up, and you can kind of see that as we freeze the scene. You can see that here in the kind of shaded blue area. That's when the customer walks up, and we can see, are people actually paying attention when the customer comes up to the front? Are they looking in the right place? Or are they looking off to the right? Are they distracted? Have they been looking around too much and now are fatigued, right? So we can start to get a better insight into, hey, if people are not getting things correct, why are they not getting things correct? Are they not looking in the right place? And even you can think of scenarios where maybe they would get the answer to the question, hey, should you look at the customer when they walk up? Yeah, of course. But what if all this other stuff is going around? That's an assessment you can't typically get in certainly a paper-based training or even a computer-based training. And again, this attention data lets us know why. It's not just what they chose to how they chose to perform, but why they did that. And this could really be helpful for follow-up training, right? So if you know that there's certain people who are not doing well and they're not paying attention, this could really lend itself nicely to adaptive training, adaptive follow-up training for those individuals. So that's a nice example of what we're doing with our attention analytics. And then I want to turn our attention, no pun intended, to what we're doing with what we call the link between engagement performance. This is our engagement analytics, basically. And so what we're doing with engagement, it's really a way to combine things like attention and other factors of the headset experience, of the VR training experience, to know how much effort you're putting in. Basically, how much do you care about this training? How much are you paying attention to the things you're supposed to be paying attention to? And not surprisingly, that's really well kind of corresponds to, or well maps to, performance data. And so what we have displayed in this graph is a really good example from our own data, working with one of our customers, of how as the engagement score goes up, the performance score goes up, not surprisingly. We can use that, right? We can use that meaningfully then to guide future training. So if we know someone's not as engaged as they should be, or if they are as engaged as they should be, we can maybe kind of after the fact take a look at that and say, hey, these people weren't engaged, these people were engaged, maybe we give them different training. And ultimately, this could be used as a way to understand and predict real world performance, right? So how are people going to perform in the real world? Well, we can just start to look at their engagement score, right? We can see how engaged generally they are with training. And what's really interesting is we can do this across a lot of different types of training. So the engagement score isn't something that is specific to one experience. You can have people take many different types of trainings, and you can see it. Are they engaged the same throughout all the different types of trainings we're giving them? And ultimately, you can come up with a general sense of, are they engaged trainee? Are they not engaged trainee? And how is that going to matter when it comes to putting them in those critical situations of interest? So that's a layer of insight, again, that we can use to compare performance across different types of experiences. We don't have to just wonder what's happening in this experience and how does it translate to another training experience, or how does it even translate to the real world. So that's something that we think is really exciting and pretty interesting, and definitely new for the world of training, and only really happens by looking at the data that comes out of the VR headset. Similar to engagement, we're actually looking at training for what we're calling so-called soft skills. And this is an example of you interacting with a customer and trying to de-escalate them. What's important here, and the concept that's related to engagement, is this one of making sure that you create enough emotional connection, right? So the idea being you want to be emotionally connected to your environment. That's going to lead to better training. Like a lot of learning, the more kind of depth of processing that you have. So if you're processing things on just kind of like a text-based layer, which is kind of a surface layer, you're going to get something out of it. But if you're able to process it more deeply, in other words, if you can start to really feel what it's like to be in that scenario, interacting with a customer, that's going to lead to a much more deeper layer of learning, and consequently much more effective type of learning. And that draws on many decades of research in the learning space. And so that's what we do here. We basically create these emotionally laden environments so that when the kind of time comes in the real world, you're actually much more prepared than if you were just getting paper-based lecture types of training. More than that, we can start to look at what we're calling verbal analytics from these soft skills. So what's really cool is we can see how people react when they're presented with an emotional environment, in this case in particular, emotional customer. And we can actually measure and see based on the voice response. And so part of the critical part of this training is that they're actually responding with their own voice, saying their own words of how they would respond to a customer. We can actually layer on a set of verbal analytics that will let us know whether or not they're improving. And in this case, improvement comes from what we're calling verbal fluency. And verbal fluency is just effectively more intentional, more confident speech. And we can see on the left, in that left part of the graph, those are where the average score was when people took this training for the first time. By the time they got to the third repetition, which is the right side of that graph, or that red box, you can see there was a much higher increase, a significant increase, in fact, in verbal fluency, which makes us think that, hey, this training is actually working. Obviously, the next thing we'd like to do is to see how that bears out in real world performance. But just this result alone, an objective, systematic way to capture performance of your verbal data, which is critical when you're trying to train for soft skills, increases. And so for the first time, we're really seeing these metrics become objective, become automated, become systematic, and maybe more importantly, they come from a real world environment, right? You sitting there with an individual and having to produce speech. So that's a really unique thing. Instead of having to rely on subjective self-reports, we can rely on this objective automated metric of these verbal analytics. All right, so I'll get into the last bucket of data and analytics that we perform at Strivr, and this is what we're calling predictive analytics. And again, predictive analytics aren't unique, but they're unique when they're done in immersive training. And in this case, what we were trying to do was to predict candidate assessment performance. So this was an assessment that we gave to a lot of potential candidates in a particular area of an organization, and we wanted to see, hey, if we came up with a score in VR, so in other words, we take them through an experience, we have them perform a bunch of behaviors, and we come up with a score at the end of the day, how does that score actually map to any real world performance? So up until now, we were talking about ways to measure performance just from the VR data alone. So the headset data that we get, the choice data, the attention data, the engagement data. Now what we're doing is we're moving into the real world, and we're able to connect a lot of that headset performance data and engagement data, analytic data with what happens in the real world. So our score, as it turns out from this just one experience that we have in doing this kind of assessment work, our score that incorporates the decision-making data, that performance data, along with the attention, along with the engagement, actually predicted in almost 80% or more than 80% of the cases how people would actually perform in the real world. So our score mapped pretty well to what was happening in the real world, as opposed to just flipping a coin. You can actually start to make predictions of real world performance just based on what's going on in the headset. And that's, of course, incredibly efficient, right? Instead of having to go through all the machinations of doing the assessments, doing the inventories, all the interviews, put them in 20 minutes of VR, see what the score looks like, and you can be pretty confident that's gonna be reflective of their real world performance. So I'll stop there. I think that's a pretty good summary of what we're doing with all the kind of cool, unique VR data that we get, and immersive analytics more broadly, and how we're creating new insights for customers based on that data.
Thank you, Michael. Now let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about how to get started at your own company. We really like to focus on the business objectives that you're solving. It's important to us that you're not just implementing a shiny new toy or new type of technology, but that we are truly solving problems that your business cares about and that can drive the bottom line. There are 3 things that you need to do to get started. One is define the business objectives. Number 2, select mission critical use cases. And the third thing is to establish early on what success metrics are so that you can better define your data strategy. And we want you to know that we are here to partner with you. So as at Stryver, we really do stay focused on the true to life scenarios. As performance experts, we support strategic business objectives with our unique learning methodology and expertise. Our end-to-end solution includes a software platform, professional services, content production, and hardware management. And we leverage our unique data to continuously improve your training and meet your business objectives. So, all right, in summary, we first introduced immersive learning and the future of work and put that into context. And we are really seeing that technology is driving a step change in the ability for companies to be able to train their employees and also satisfy the expectations of the modern workforce. We then talked to Andy about how they're looking at the future of work and using immersive learning techniques at their company. And we looked at the data and insights that are unique to immersive learning. And then finally, we looked at how you can get started at your own company. So the next steps, if you're curious to do anything more, 1, please visit us at strivr.com. You can always contact sales. There's a big button at the top, or you can email sales@strivr.com. After this webinar, I will also be sending you an ebook that I think will sum up all of what you heard today very nicely and is very relevant for anyone who's in HR or L&D. So those are the main things you can do to get started. We hope you found this very interesting and hope to see you again.